Hello. Welcome to all. Hello, good. So good to see you all here on the JB Font channel. So good to see all of you here. The JB Font channel is available on all major podcast platforms like Anchor, Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. So you can subscribe to me there. I'm also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network. So if you guys would like to, you guys can find me on the JB Show on Sundays at 1. Also, you can find me on RBN Live on Tuesdays at 4 and the Sebby and JB Show on Thursdays at 6. Now, if you guys would like to, you guys can also catch me on my typical days on Tuesdays at 2 for my channel. So you guys can go ahead and watch me there. Now, so good to see all of you here today. And if you guys would like to as well, you guys can also subscribe to uh, my Substack. You guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com so you guys can actually see, whenever I go live or upload clips. So thank you so very much if you have already done so. And as well, in addition to, furthermore, thanks to all the patrons on Patreon, Coffee, as well as members. Without you guys, I would not be able to do this. So thank you so very much to all the members on all these different platforms. And if you guys would like to, you guys can also contribute to me via various platforms if you guys would like to help me out in any other way, shape, or form to fund this channel. So thank you so very much. So what are we going to be talking about? Yes, this is actually live. This is not a drill. So one of the things that I will be doing is I will be reading live the book Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devon Price. This I'm reading chapter 2, part 1. So this is actually going to be a very good reading. So this is Laziness Does Not Exist, Dr. Devon Price. So this part is actually really interesting. So this chapter is talked about. It's called Rethinking Laziness. And I see this as something that really just like it was cathartic, right? And I think that was one of the things that was great for me was that because it was basically telling me that you're not crazy for feeling the way you feel, that you're healthy in some of these feelings that you feel because you're dealing and this is just from my thoughts, you're dealing with a system that really is not good for you. So therefore your body reacts in a way to preserve itself. So that's honestly how I feel. But I want to get into it because there's, a lot in here to go to. So this is going to be starting on page 37. And chapter 2 is called Rethinking Laziness. So this is what we're going to be talking about. And this is actually really good. I hope that you guys get a lot out of this because I did. And this was actually it was actually comforting. It wasn't just, it's on. A lot of times people would think it's just, almost like a confirmation bias, but it's not. It's more of an explanation of why you feel the way you feel sometimes. So let's get into it. When I met Julie, she was the executive director of a nonprofit here in Chicago. Her organization provided creative writing classes to Chicago public school students, particularly those in underfunded, understaffed schools in the city's south and west side neighborhoods. Kids love having classroom visits from Julie's organization. The teachers are actors, writers, and performers, and a large percentage of them are Black and Latinx, like the children they're teaching. The nonprofit's main goal is to help kids flourish creatively as writers. Each year, hundreds of children go through the program and learn to write short stories, dialogues, and persuasive essays on whatever topics they like. In her years as executive director, Julie wrote tons of grant applications, found ways to save the organization's money without cutting off staff or essentials, and built a sizable financial nest egg for the company to fall back on for years to come. She put together professional development events that her staff actually enjoyed. She supported employees when they struggled through personal issues and medical emergencies, When Chicago public schools faced budget cuts and school closings, Julie was at the protests and teacher strikes, fighting to protect educational access to the kids who needed it most. She did all of this time consuming badass work while raising an infant daughter and coping with an anxiety disorder. At the time in her life, Julie was a total productivity powerhouse. She worked hard, she fought for causes that she believed in, she parented her kid, she managed her employees with compassion and flexibility. In other words, she was winning the game the laziness lie taught us we have to play. She was having it all. Then one evening, the night her daughter turned a year old, Julie came home and her husband, Rich, said he didn't love her anymore. Julie's life was about to completely fall apart. The next couple of years would be defined by marital therapy, doctors and psychiatrist appointments, a move to a new state, lots of yoga, and a quitting of several jobs. Everything about how Julie set her priorities was about to drastically change. Her long journey towards embracing a slower, lazier life was about to begin. Rich became increasingly erratic and self destructive, and months after he told Julie he no longer loved her, he started an emotional affair with a woman who worked at Julie's nonprofit. He was visibly depressed and started talking about suicide. Gotta be careful what I say. Instead of contemplating leaving the marriage, Julie chose to support Rich and help figure out what caused his behavior to change so dramatically. She had a gut feeling that his actions were not a deliberate malice choice. I was going crazy, Julie says, because I was like, this is not my husband. This is not the person I've known for so long. And after we've been together since I was 20. So we know each other pretty well. After several psychiatrist appointments, they discovered Julie was right. It turned out that Rich had bipolar disorder. His symptoms were exacerbated by the stress of balancing parenting with a full-time job that required him to travel often. For years, Rich had been privately trying to manage his symptoms without even realizing it. But as the stress in his life continued to mount, his ability to cope got worse and worse. Suddenly, Julie had to scramble not only to repair her marriage, but also keep her husband functioning and alive. It's interesting when, you read things like this. A lot of times we don't realize some of the mental issues that happen to us in our brains while we're dealing with a lot of the stresses and a lot of the diseases of despair that befall us, right? And a lot of us aren't as fortunate or as financially successful as Julie would be, right? So we just have to kind of muster up the courage to deal with it. We have to power through it, so to speak. You know what I mean? And the problem is that we just do not have that wherewithal to do it, because there's so many other things that we have to deal with on top of having to work, having to make sure bills are paid. If we have kids, we have to make sure they're taken care of. If we have parents that we have to take care of, if we have a sibling that we have to take care of, things like that. So it's so many different, variables that go into what happens with us. And so we're just like, yeah, this really difficult. And then on top of it, sometimes we may end up having to self-medicate, which means we may turn to either, prescription drugs or street drugs in order to self-medicate, in order for us to be able to function within a system that makes sure that we don't function as well as we should. Because if we actually did, then we would actually do a lot better. So yeah, let's continue. One evening, Rich was having a particularly severe mental breakdown, so Julie took him to the hospital. She also called a mental health crisis line for help. To her surprise, the crisis line operator wanted to talk to Julie about how she was doing. and what steps she was taking to care for herself during such an immensely stressful and traumatic time. Julie realized that she didn't have good answers to those questions. She hadn't had time to think about her well being at all. At this point, at that point, Julie says, I was like, we can't keep doing this. We can't both be doing full time jobs. And I'm under all this stress. And I have to take care of the kid and my husband and this company and everybody in the company. This just isn't sustainable. Julie realized that she and her husband had to shift their priorities. They were too busy, too stressed, and too overextended to care for their daughter and maintain their own functionality and mental health at the same time. So, Julie created a plan. She realized that since Rich's job could be done from anywhere in the Midwest, not just Chicago, it made sense for them to move somewhere cheaper to live. In a more affordable town, Julie could stay at home and be the primary parent for their daughter, freeing up time for Rich to rest and look after his mental health. And because they'd be living in a suburb rather than a loud, busy, crowded city, Julie would have more space in her life for self-care too. Rich agreed to give the plan a shot. Julie resigned from her position at the nonprofit. They sold their house and then used the money to provide a financial cushion for the move. They found a comfortable, affordable home in Wisconsin and relocated. My story just reeks of privilege, Julie says. We were really lucky with real estate. We knew that we were going to be able to sell our house for a lot. Julie describes herself as a stay-at-home mom now. Though she does run multiple small businesses out of her home, she started 3 different small companies in the 4 years she's been in Wisconsin, in fact. Her drive to work incredibly hard hasn't left her. Still, she says her life now has room in it for her to breathe. I think that's important. Like, we need to breathe. And it's not just like a physical thing. It's an emotional and mental thing that we have. And I think a lot of times, you ever hear that phrase, I'll sleep when I'm dead, or sleep is for the weak, right? That's really denying your mental and emotional and physical health for the sake of productivity. When in reality, what good is it if your death comes quickly because you work so much? Just a thought. I have emotional space for other people and for myself now, she says. And I'm much kinder and nicer. In Chicago, all I had the emotional capacity for was getting to work, picking up my kid, driving across town in traffic to drop her off where she had to go, worrying about parking. I had these blinders on. That's just a whole nother thing. She said I am much kinder and nicer. Could it be that people are just jerks because they're exhausted? Could it be that we live in a system that perpetuates people, that pushes people to produce so much to the point where they suffer from mental and emotional and physical exhaustion? So it makes them unkind, mean people. So therefore, it makes it harder for us to actually have and build relationships with others. Because a lot of these people, they're not mean, they're not hateful, they're just tired. Something to think about too. Nowadays, Julie sets firm limits on how much work she does and how much anxiety her family is exposed to. She knows the alternative is disastrous. Recently, she took a part-time job teaching at a dance studio. Some interpersonal drama was erupting between other teachers there, and Julie could tell the tension was taking a toll on her well-being. Then, the dance world can also be seen full of sexism and fat shaming, and Julie didn't want to expose herself or her daughter to it. So she walked away from the job, even though she had started working there. Saying no so firmly and so quickly would have been a massive struggle for her for a few years ago. And that's also another thing. For some of us, we push ourselves to the brink where for us saying no is one of the hardest things to do, you know. And yes, SG says yes, agree. Most people are stressed and we think they are rude. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we need to start to take into consideration when it comes to, people is thinking, are they upset at us or are they just exhausted? Or are they dealing with something internal that we don't know about? And I think that's something that we have to, kind of gauge whenever we're interacting with people. It could even be our loved ones. Julie had a taste for what it is like to set her own schedule and rule her life according to her own priorities. And that has changed everything. Now she can walk away when things aren't working for her. This is totally cliche, she says, but I do yoga, and every time I'm in a balance pose, I think about how much work balance is. It's a constant attention. You have to keep shifting to find it. Julie and Rich have attained a healthy balance in their marriage too. They've been incredibly honest and candid with all of their friends and family about the struggles they've experienced and have learned how to ask for help when they need it. Their communication has opened up in fantastic ways. Just to stop right there, it says they have learned how to ask for help when they need it. That's another thing. We live in an individualistic society that is so prevalent to be individualistic that even the means to ask for help is seen as a moral failing. You need help? You can't do it all by yourself? You're weak. Saying someone is weak for asking help when humans by default are a organizational collective species is basically saying that you should be denying your humanity in order to survive. No. If you need help, ask for help. And I'm saying this especially to men because we're always taught go on it, do it on your own. Deal with it by yourself. Keep it on the inside. Don't let it out. Just deal with it on your own. When in reality, that is one of the most dangerous things that we can do. The other evening, I was feeling anxious, and Rich was feeling anxious. We were doing things around the house, and I just said to him, I think we're about to have a fight, Julie tells me. I could feel this tension building up between us, and I thought, what if I just acknowledge that out loud? As soon as Julie observed the anger building up, she and Rich were able to diffuse it. Rich was like, I don't want to fight either, Julie says. And I told him, I don't want to fight either. It was scary to name this thing I wanted to run away from, but then we were able to deal with it. Whenever I talk to Julie and Rich, I can't help but notice how comfortable, candid, and downright silly they are with each other. There's a relaxed honesty between them that I've only seen in a handful of couples in my life. Together, they were able to take a relationship that was in tatters and rebuild it into something far more valuable and enduring. That never would have been possible when they were both overworked. So this also even affects your relationships with your spouse, with your partners, family, friends. We live in a system that pushes us so much that it really is isolating, emotionally and mentally isolating as well, to the point where the only time we have for human interactions when we're on this. And that's it. So this is why things have got to change. This is why books like this are very important. I think some people might look at Julie's story and see a woman running away or giving up. Julie mentioned that her own mother has a hard time understanding the changes she's made in her life. One way that Julie marked these changes is by getting the word surrender tattooed up on her upper arm. And her mom found that totally baffling. I got a lot of shit from my mom for that tattoo, Julie says. She was like, surrender? That's such a weak word. But Julie's new tattoo in life reflected her newfound understanding that she cannot control everything. She cannot work a full time job, parent a child, and navigate an evolving relationship with her husband while also maintaining her own well being and health. She can't prioritize everyone else's needs above her own. If she wants to thrive, she has to give some things up. She learned not to feel guilt over every opportunity she walks away from or every obligation she says no to. That is an incredibly difficult lesson to learn. In a world that equates laziness with evil, saying no is often deemed unacceptable. Our culture looks down on people who quit things. Rather than encourage their good judgment and self respect, we perceive them as weak willed or dishonest. Woo! Wow. Isn't that interesting? You're seen as weak for acknowledging your limitations and being able to say no. But acknowledging your limitations and being able to say no means that you would limit the amount of productivity that you do, which in a capitalist system is a no-no. Wow. Hmm. Rather than encouraging their good judgment and self-respect, we perceive them as weak-willed or dishonest. When a person juggles dozens and dozens of responsibilities, we laud them for having it all. But what happens if they decide they don't want it all, or that constant juggling isn't worth it? Can we actually respect a person who revokes their consent? Can we see a person as impressive for admitting that they no longer want to carry something they've been shouldering for too long? Many of us never learn how to surrender, even when we desperately need to. We've been browbeaten into saying yes for so long that we don't know what a confident no feels like. I'm going to read this again. We've been browbeaten into saying yes for so long that we don't know what a confident no feels like. How hard is it for you to say no? How difficult is it? It's interesting because I was actually talking to Savvy about this, Savvy Sabs. We had a private conversation, and I was basically saying that for a lot of people, it is so hard for us to say no, and we get to a point where we overextend ourselves, and when we overextend ourselves, then we start to regret that overextension. We start to have we start to feel bad about having to do it because now we don't have the energy, we don't have the bandwidth to do it. And we wanted to say no before, but we just didn't have the will to do it. And so now we're stretched beyond our limits. It's just crazy. But then if we say no, some people will be like, what do you mean no? And the funny thing is that a lot of people and I'm finding this out for myself, no is a complete sentence. And I'm figuring that out for myself. This is just interesting, right? Let's see. SG says, well, she's living now. Before she was like an automaton. How many of us feel we don't enjoy the time with kids until they're all grown up? Yes, that is true. News and analyst with Arturo says solidarity, bro. Good to see you as well. Yep, definitely true. Let's continue. We so often see laziness as an indulgence we never truly deserve. Ooh. In a world that's beholden to the laziness lie, many of us feel we have to hide our desire for free time. I know that when I cancel plans, I try to find a really plausible, virtuous seeming excuse. Sorry, I couldn't make it to game night. I had to stay late at work. Truth, I just didn't feel like going. Isn't this true? There's times where people want to do something with us and we're like, yeah, sure, okay. But then when the time comes, it's like, oh, I don't feel like going. I don't want to do this. And then you have to come up with an excuse just to lay it down easy on people. You know, you don't want to make them feel bad, right? Man. The truth, I just didn't feel like going, seems unacceptable to voice. Admitting I want to sit around and do nothing would make me look lazy. It would tell everyone I was weak. The funny thing is, who told you that sitting around and just doing nothing, who told you that that was wrong? Especially when, you know, your bills are paid, your house is clean, you know, even if it's not. Like, who told you that just having this time to just blank out is wrong? Who told you that? But what if all that was totally wrong? It seems to me that being upfront about your limits and needs is a sign of strength, not weakness. Cutting back on obligations doesn't mean you're hurting or disappointing other people either. Openly and proudly saying, no, I don't feel like doing that, can help free others to do the same in their own lives. Many of the lazy behaviors we've been told to avoid, like the plague, are actually very mature, responsible choices. In chapter 1, I discussed where the laziness lie came from and the ways in which laziness lies sets us up for failure and exhaustion. In this chapter, I want to take the argument even further and explore how resting, quitting things, cutting corners, and all other actions we typically write off as laziness can actually help us heal and grow. A great deal of research actually supports the notion that our lazy feelings are protective and instructive, and that our lives can improve a great deal when we decide to stop judging our desire for idle, lazy time and start trusting those feelings instead. Looks like I'm going to have to take a sip of some water for this one because this is going to be good. Because I don't know, this is just so interesting because hang on, sorry, the page flipped on me. I lost my spot. Oh yeah, I did. Okay. So yeah, this is, you know, such an interesting part that, you know, I'm glad I picked up this book because I saw it in passing and I was just like, I got to pick this up. So I'm going to be continuing this subheading now. It says laziness is not evil. So this is going to be a really good one. Laziness is not evil. I got into a fight with a college freshman on Twitter recently. Haven't we all? Well, not a fight, just a long, tense discussion. He was outraged by my belief that laziness was not evil. An inexplicable thing we've all been taught to view it as. In an essay I posted online a few years ago, I said that seemingly lazy people almost always have a sensible reason for why they lack energy or drive. If you understand what a lazy person is going through, even their most self defeating lazy behavior can start to make sense. But this young man, let's call him James. Gee, thanks, Dr. Price. Thought I was overlooking several types of laziness that were objectively senseless and wrong. Like many people, James, oh gosh, I can't believe name James. Anyways, like many people, James seemed convinced that his own inaction and laziness were far worse than most other people's. He mentioned that his laziness came from having depression, but insisted that mental illness wasn't a valid excuse for his bad behavior. James told me that sometimes whole days would pass before he'd muster energy to leave his room. Wasn't that wasn't that clearly unacceptable behavior he wanted to know? Wasn't that kind of laziness terrible, no matter its cause? James also told me that in high school, some of his friends prided themselves on their laziness. He said that he and his friends procrastinated on purpose to stick it to their school. One student in particular became infamous for writing entire papers in the hour before class started. Surely someone who does that is inexcusably lazy, right? Finally, James told me that at college he met people who were truly apathetic about doing well in life. They seemed to have no good reason for failing to work hard. He wanted to know how my belief system accounted for people who didn't seem to be facing any personal challenges and failed to get things done because they simply didn't care. James' question touched on three different types of people who tend to get pigeonholed as lazy in our society: depressed people, procrastinators, and apathetic people who didn't see the point in caring about work or school. Managers and professors look down on folks like these. Friends and family find their inaction confounding. Society as a whole tend to resent them for not contributing enough to the world. But in these three groups of people, you can find clear illustrations of exactly why a lack of motivation isn't a personal failing or the awful, morally negligent act the laziness lie wants to believe that it is. Let's get into it. Depressed people. Now, I'm going to say this from the outset. I have dealt with depression, especially in my 20s and my early 30s. So I definitely know what that feels like. So, yeah, depression can really be debilitating. The first type of inexcusably lazy person James wanted to ask me about was a person with depression. He mentioned right out of the gate that he had major depressive disorder. During a depressive episode, James said that he looked deeply lazy to the outside world. Lazy might not be a pretty way to describe it, he tweeted to me, but it's accurate. In a depressive episode, all I do is sleep. I didn't get anything done. When James is depressed, he didn't have the energy to clean his room or do homework. He misses classes. He sleeps all day. Wasn't he failing in all these areas of life because he was lazy? More to the point, wasn't that laziness bad? This view of depression is disturbingly common. Despite all the work mental health activists have put into fighting this stigmatization of mental illness, negative and ignorant perceptions of the disorder remain prevalent. Many professors still believe, for example, that depression isn't a valid excuse for students lacking the energy to turn in assignments on time. When an employee divulges to their manager that they have depression, they're more likely to be punished for taking sick days than other employees are. Isn't that interesting? That's wild. You go to your boss and you tell them, "Yeah, I've been kind of depressed lately." Next thing you know, if you take a sick day, then they're judging you even more harshly. That's crazy, man. Their odds of being fired go way up too, even though the quality of their work remains the same. Parents of depressed children and teenagers often respond to their kids' symptoms by criticizing them rather than providing them with understanding or support. Because depression doesn't harm the body in a visible, obvious way, many people fail to understand why a depressed person lacks the energy to get things done. In a massive survey administered in 2018, over 30% of respondents agreed with their statement that depression is caused by having a weak personality. Our culture's propensity to judge and blame the lazy still runs very deep. It is no wonder that James had absorbed some of these ideas. So, why are depressed people so lazy? The first thing to realize is that fighting depression is a full time job. I'm going to read that again. The first thing to realize is that fighting depression is a full time job. Depressed people sleep a lot because their brains get tired from fighting negative thoughts and feelings all day. Depressed people also have lower quality of sleep, meaning they get less energy from 8 hours of rest than a non depressed person does. When you're severely depressed, particularly if you're suicidal, sleep can be the only escape from misery you have. In a very real way, the apparent laziness of depressed people is a sign that their bodies and minds are protecting them and working to help them heal. Depression also saps the brain's ability to plan and execute activities. Something that might seem simple to a non depressed person, such as doing a load of laundry, can become an overwhelming series of painful tasks to someone who's depressed. It is hard to take a large job and break it down into small steps when your brain is struggling to function. A person's memory gets worse when they experience depression, as does their ability to pay attention and filter information. It is not a moral failure for an exhausted person to let some responsibilities drop. In many cases, it is essential that they be lazy in a few areas of life they want to if they want to have the energy to stay afloat in others. So, this just goes to show how we're literally dealing with that condition affects you physiologically. Because mental, emotional, as well as physical, they're all connected. When one affects one part of your body, it affects another. You're dealing with so much more than you think. And I think that's the problem. Sorry, for some reason my my connection went out for a second. But let's continue. Actually, before I do that, oh wow, news and analysis what Arturo says my dad criticizes me. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that, there's many different variables as why we're considered lazy, but really it's just exhaustion. Trauma Queen says depression can be debilitating. Absolutely. Aaron D'Avagne says, and being depressed becomes a mental illness in the manual, right? it is considered a mental illness, psychiatric manual. That is, yeah. And news and analysis by Arturo says fighting depression and CPTSD at the same time is a full-time job. Yeah. Now, oh Lord, now we're about to get into procrastinators. I'm gonna feel attacked in this one. So if I respond in a very visceral way, that's only because I feel attacked. Ah! Okay. This is gonna be tough. Procrastinators. James wasn't really buying my argument at this point. He still felt pretty confident about that being lazy wasn't at all understandable or okay. So he pivoted a bit and told me about how in high school, he and many of his friends prided themselves on their laziness and procrastination. We were self-proclaimed procrastinators and took it as a badge of honor, he tweeted. It was a counterculture against the strictness of our school. One friend would wait until an hour before class to start a project. Surely procrastination is an unacceptable form of laziness, right? Right? Procrastinators lack focus and ambition, and their work is done in a half-assed, last-minute way. The evils of procrastination could easily be avoided if only the procrastinator would just work a little harder in advance, or at least that's what people tend to think. In reality, procrastination is a much more complex beast, one that is often caused by caring a whole lot and wanting to do well. When a person procrastinates, it's typically because they're paralyzed in some way by anxiety, by confusion about how to get started on a big, complicated project, or both. I think most people have experienced both of these types of paralysis at one time or another. Imagine you see a job posting for a position that sounds amazing. It's truly your dream job, a rare opportunity. You want to get a wonderful, well-written application in on time, so you dazzle the hiring manager and beat out your competition. But try as you might, you find you can't make progress on it. You don't know what your cover letter should say. You know the application asks for references, but you don't know whom you ought to ask. You're afraid to even look at your resume because it's so out of date that it's embarrassing. Soon, you just think about the job application. Soon, just thinking about the job application causes you to feel nauseated, and nervous. So you go and play video games instead. I told you I wouldn't feel attacked. So you go to play video games instead to distract yourself from your anxious thoughts. Then you feel guilty for not working on the job application, which makes you anxious all over again. So you then take a nap or go clean your kitchen. Before you know it, the week has passed and you haven't even looked at the job application. Maybe you hastily threw one together, hold your nose and send it off at the last minute, or maybe you gave up entirely because you felt like you already blew your chance. Either way, you're left feeling like a lazy screw up. Oh my gosh, this is me. Go ahead in the chat. Go ahead. JB, you're a procrastinator. Yes, I am. I am. God, I wish there was liquor in this thing. This is why me? Why? I should have put liquor in it. Because I can't deal with this right now. I feel so attacked. This book, Dr. Price, why? Oh, Lord. Procrastinators often get caught in a cycle of perfectionism, anxiety, and distraction and failure. Because they care a great deal about doing very well, they hold themselves to an impossibly high standard. They want to do perfect work, but their early attempts are far from perfect. So they get discouraged and anxious. As time passes and the deadline approaches, they become even more nervous and concerned about failure. That fear makes it even harder to focus and make progress. To cope with their feelings and anxiety, they distract themselves in any way they can. And then, when the deadline finally arrives, the procrastinator must choose between submitting quickly thrown together work that isn't very good or giving up entirely. Damn. Hmm. James seemed to think that he and his friends procrastinated for no good reason. In his mind, they were being bad students just for the hell of it. However, if they're anything like most procrastinators, they had a whole host of sympathetic reasons to explain their behavior. Though they're frequently labeled as lazy, procrastinators don't lack motivation. In fact, they tend to care a lot about doing well. Research has repeatedly found that people procrastinate more when a task is one that really matters to them. Unfortunately, they lack the confidence and clarity to start plugging away at it in a productive way. The good news is that it is possible for a chronic procrastinator to break out of the cycle. With help and encouragement, a procrastinator can be taught to divide large responsibilities into micro tasks, each with their own very short term deadlines. Something as big and vague as write a 10-page paper can be paralyzing, but write 2 paragraphs per day can be manageable. This, combined with treatment for their anxiety, can help procrastinators become far more productive, reliable, and confident in their lives. And this last paragraph was really a godsend. A godsend. Take your projects, chop them up into little itty bitty pieces, and do one here, chill out. Do it a little bit more, chill out. A little bit more, chill out. So basically, it's like, okay, so you have a bucket of Legos, right? And you can build this big castle of Legos, but that's kind of daunting. But and you know your deadline's in 2 weeks. Each day you go, I'm gonna do 10 Legos, right? So you do 10 here, and then you chill out. A few hours later, another 10. Click, 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 click. Chill out. Then you do another 10. Click, 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 click. Chill out. And then you start to see the progress. And so that debilitating feeling, that daunting feeling starts to go away as you start to see that Lego castle build up. So by the time you're halfway done, you're like, damn. And so maybe there might be a day where you'll do 20 instead of 10, right? And then you'll go chill out again. And then you'll do 10 again, and then you'll chill out again. You know, you'll vary a little bit. But then you start to see the progress. And so that lifts that weight off your shoulders. So then the need to procrastinate goes away. Because you started early, but then you cut it up into little tiny pieces, right? That's something that really is going to help me a lot in the future. Joanna says, oh, licensed social worker here. This author is doing a good job of explaining depressive symptoms with that vignette. Thank you so very much. Yeah. News and analysis with Arturo says, bro, that procrastinating paragraph talks about me. Me too. And then Joanna says, that strategy falls under the executive functioning skill of a task inflation called chunking tasks. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. All right. Thank you. I love having experts in the chat. Ow. Okay. Now, to the next part. Apathetic people. What about people who are truly unmotivated? People who put off tasks because they simply don't care. James mentioned that his friends put off homework in order to rebel against their overly strict school. This doesn't necessarily sound like a group of kids being lazy because of anxiety or depression or confusion about how to do well. For some of them at least, it sounds like they truly didn't care. Isn't there something uniquely terrible about being that apathetic? Wasn't the laziness lie right to teach us that such people deserve our judgment? Believe it or not, I don't think so. When someone seems completely apathetic, I don't see them as a failure. Instead, I tend to think that they have been failed in some way. Let's take the ever popular example of the kid who doesn't try hard in algebra class because he doesn't think that he'll use algebra in real life. I used to feel the same way about math myself. I got a C in statistics when I was in college because the class was hard and boring, and I didn't take it seriously. It was too abstract and vague to seem relevant in my life. Nobody went to the trouble explaining to me why the subject was important or how it could be relevant to my psychology major. Even within the class itself, this was never made clear. I continued to feel apathetic about statistics until I was trained as a researcher in graduate school. I quickly realized that I needed statistics to determine whether my experiments had worked. My career wasn't going to go anywhere if I didn't know how to analyze the data I'd collected, so I put the work in. Bit by bit, I started excelling at stats. Nowadays, I teach statistics classes with enthusiasm. I actually love the subject and help organizations analyze their data in my work as a statistical consultant. But I got to this place only because I finally saw why this dull, difficult subject mattered in my own life. Now, whenever I teach statistics, I work hard to help my students see why the subject deserves their attention and time. I demonstrate to them why it ought to be one of their priorities. When I've done my job well, they get it and put in the effort. That's very important. So when I see that somebody doesn't care about a particular goal, whether it's becoming financially independent, finishing a degree, or even voting, I find myself wondering, why does this activity seem pointless to them? According to James, he and his peers didn't take classwork seriously because their school was overly strict. That makes complete sense to me. When you feel stuck in a controlling environment where nobody treats you with trust, you're naturally going to want to rebel against it. Of course, it's hard for teenagers to self-motivate when they've had adults telling them what to do and how to do it all their lives. If James's school had given him and his peers more freedom and agency, they might have risen to the challenge instead of checking out. Sometimes people become apathetic because of depression or trauma. Other times, because people turn to apathy after repeatedly being disenfranchised. Psychologists call this learned helplessness, and we see it in victims of abuse, people who have been incarcerated, and families that have experienced generation of poverty and racism. I know this because I am Black. And because we have been subject to some of these things, therefore, a lot of Black people are very deeply apathetic. And remember how some people will go, well, Black people are just lazy. See why I read this book? Like the stream, by the way. Doesn't it make sense now? Let me read that again. Sometimes people become apathetic because of depression or trauma. Other times, people turn to apathy after repeatedly being disenfranchised. Psychologists call this learned helplessness, and we see it in victims of abuse, people who have been incarcerated, and families that have experienced generations of poverty and racism. Doesn't this explain a lot about why people label black people as lazy, even though we're not? We may be apathetic, but we're not lazy because we're constantly having to fight and deal with all the BS that this system has perpetuated against us. When you lose power over your own life, you don't have much reason to stay energized and motivated. So you protect yourself emotionally by checking out and giving up. And workplaces with ineffective or incompetent managers, for example, employees become apathetic because they know their hard work will go unnoticed and underappreciated. We also see this in the low voter turnout rate in the United States. The majority of non-voters are people of color and people living in poverty, who report that they do not feel their interests are being represented by the political options available to them. Now, I will push back on Dr. Devon Price by saying this. Unfortunately, also the question of whether we actually do live in a democracy is quite apparent. Now, if you want to do like local elections, things like that, yeah. But when it comes to like the national elections and voting for a lot of these people for federal office, you really don't have that much of a choice. Now, one thing I will say is you use your motivations to do other things outside of it that are more weighted and heavier. Like, for instance, working within your community, mutual aid, things like that. And so instead of letting your apathy take over and when it comes to voting, use that will that you have in order to push for things in your community outside of voting. And if somebody wants to, then they can still do it. But I think voting is the least you can do. The best things you can do is actually within your community by helping your community as a whole. That's the only thing I'll say. Pulling back one's effort level in such situations is perfectly rational. It may not be pretty, but it's not a personal failing either. In so many cases, what we call laziness is actually a person coping with a ton of challenges and attempting to set priorities based on their needs. When a person is pushed to their limit, supposedly lazy feelings and behaviors tend to pop up. Apathy, low motivation, and inability to focus and desire to waste time doing nothing, these are all valuable warning signs. They can teach us a great deal about our limits and needs. However, in order to benefit from this highly evolved dynamic warning system, we have to learn to stop writing it off as inexcusable laziness. I want to keep going because there's this other part. Okay, the next subheading is laziness is a warning. That's going to be good. But I don't want this to go on too long. This reading, I try to keep my readings to within an hour. But this is going, this next part is going to be so good. And I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So we'll be catching back up on page 49. And we'll start in the subheading, laziness is a warning, for next time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this reading. This was very cathartic for me. This really put into my head that your mind, your mind, and your emotions have warning systems that are telling you, look, this is why you're going through what you're going through. Chill out. And the thing is, and I think I remember it being brought out that during the times of feudalism, the serfs, the people who worked under the feudal lords, actually had more time off than we do today. In feudal times, they actually have more time off than we do today. We actually work more than they do. Crazy, isn't it? We are running and running and running and running and running and running and running, and we don't stop. And then when our bodies literally are making us forcing us to stop. They're putting on the emergency brakes. Then you'll have people come to you, you're lazy. When in reality, our body's telling us, no, you're exhausted. The heart's like, look, I can't take this anymore. I'm chilling out. Your brain is like, yeah, no. Put the papers down. Close up the computer. Go sit there. Look, turn on the video game system. I want to do something that's just going to make me chill for a little while. I don't even want to do all this thinking. It's too much. It's too much. And then your body's like, yeah, I'm going to bed. Let's go to sleep. Your body holds a conference. And your body's like, look, heart, brain, body, we're holding this conference because it seems like we are being pushed beyond our limits, and your body goes on strike. Your body collectively says, screw this. We're going on strike. That's what it is. And as somebody that respects when workers go on strike, we have to respect our body, our minds, and our hearts. When our body says, it's time to quit right now. It's time to chill because we can't do this anymore. So yeah, make sure to like the stream. If you have not subscribed, please make sure to subscribe. I'll be getting into that. And also, I'll be continuing the reading of Assata Shakur's autobiography. And I'll be continuing that sometime later this week. Be sure to tune in on Tuesday. I'll be covering news stories for this week as well. And so I just want to thank you guys for tuning in today. If you guys have not already, you guys can also subscribe to my Patreon. My Substack. So if you guys can get email notifications, you guys can go to jaybefaunt.substack.com for email notifications as well. And on top of it, thank you to my patrons on Patreon and Coffee. If you guys would like to, you guys can also go to the description down below for the Patreon or Coffee. Or if you guys want to just contribute via various platforms, you guys can do that there. But thank you so much, as well as to the members, because yes, I also do have memberships on here as well. So thank you so very much to all of you. And look, I'm really happy that I was able to go live and be able to do this reading. I usually only, record these things and then I upload it so that you guys can see it live. But I was like, man, this is a really good start to a chapter. So I was like, let me do this live. And so I'm happy I did. And I'm glad that I was able to read this. But I'm going to tell you all right now, that whole procrastination piece, that thing made me feel so attacked right now. But I'm glad it did, because it said, look, this is you. And this is the reason why you're feeling this way. And this is a simple solution to how you can actually do a little bit better in the future. And this actually helps me with my channel too. So thank you so much to everybody for viewing and watching. And yes, so like I always tell you guys, water your plants, water yourselves. Leave the world better than you found it. And look, listen to your body, right? Listen to what your heart, mind, and body have to say. And look, we live in a system where it forces us to not listen to our bodies. It forces us to do more because we have to survive. But if you can take those little moments in order to recharge and recover, then take those moments. No is a complete sentence, and use that word when you feel the need to. Don't be bullied into saying yes. Do what you can when you can, but that also means not forcing yourself to do things and then you end up dropping the ball later. It's very important. And remember, laziness doesn't exist. And oh yeah, like I always do, forehead kisses. I love every single one of you. And chill out. Have a good night. Love you.